King Og of Bashan was a giant who ruled with immense power and instilled fear through his strength. His story unfolds in the ancient pages of the Bible, detailing his clash with Moses and the Israelites. Despite his intimidating reputation, Moses defeated Og with divine intervention, illustrating that giants can be overcome with faith. Yet some suggest Og's imminent return. Why is there speculation about Og being the first biblical giant to awaken from his slumber? Join us as we explore the reasons behind this threatening possibility. Og is a character from ancient stories who has been mentioned in many other books written later on. One famous book about Og is Paradise Lost, written by John Milton. In this poem, Og is described as a Nephilim, a type of giant. These giants are special because they were said to be the children of gods and human women. This mix of divine and human makes Og's story particularly captivating. John Milton uses Og's character to add more depth to his story. In Paradise Lost, Og is involved in a massive fight involving heavenly beings, like angels and humans. This battle is not just a regular fight, but a grand scene that challenges our usual understanding of conflict. Milton paints a picture of this battle in a way that makes it seem larger than life and hard to fully grasp. The idea of such a big and mysterious character like Og in a dramatic battle helps readers imagine a world that is much more complex and mystical than our own. It brings a touch of the supernatural to the story, making everything more intriguing. The way Milton describes the battle and Og's role in it also adds to the epic nature of the poem, drawing readers into a vivid and dynamic world. In religious texts like the Quran and the Bible, Og stands out as a remarkably tall figure, estimated at around 13 feet tall. The size of his bed, as mentioned in Deuteronomy 3:1, supports this depiction, measuring about 13 feet 9 inches by 5 feet 3 inches. Depending on the ancient measure used, his height might range from 13 feet 9 inches to 14 feet 9 inches. Scholars typically refer to the Egyptian cubit, which was likely used by Moses, to estimate these dimensions. Og is more than just a large figure in these sacred texts. He belongs to the Rephates, a group often represented as terrifying giants. Interestingly, the term Rephates translates to undead, suggesting these were beings thought to have perished in a great flood, yet continue to exist, thereby earning the title of living legends. This interpretation casts them as more than historical figures. They are depicted as nightmarish entities that continue to linger long after their supposed demise. The biblical narrative identifies the giant as a leader among the Amorites, who are Canaan's descendants. He is noted as one of the final giants of the Rephate line, marking the end of an era. In Abraham's time, giants were becoming scarce, and by the time of Moses, they were nearly extinct, though a few, including Og, managed to survive into the time of the kings of Israel. The Dead Sea Scrolls, among other ancient writings, acknowledge Og's formidable presence, reinforcing his significant role in these ancient tales. Og's story, often overlooked in broader theological studies, challenges our understanding of history as straddling the line between myth and reality. The Rephites, with Og as a prominent figure, are described as fearsome and unusually large warriors, elements that make them seem more like characters from folklore than historical figures. Yet their frequent mentions across various holy scriptures suggest a different dimension to our historical narratives, presenting a perspective that these giants were very real, influencing the events and cultures of their times in profound ways. They serve as a reminder of a distant past that might not be fully understood, full of figures that defy simple categorization and continue to provoke wonder and debate among scholars and believers alike. The Book of Og, the king of the Rephaim giants, draws significant interest from those studying ancient texts, sparking considerable curiosity. Let's explore the story of Og, where myth meets reality. The epic tale of Og and Noah's Ark. According to these ancient stories, Og lived for 3,000 years and had encounters with biblical figures such as Moses. This longevity places him at the time of the Great Flood, an event central to many biblical tales. The story of Og's survival is particularly dramatic. Rabbi Rashi, a respected figure in Jewish tradition, tells us that Og survived the flood in a rather extraordinary way. He reportedly secured a spot on Noah's Ark by clinging to it and begging Noah for permission to come aboard. Noah, faced with the moral and practical challenges of the moment, allowed him entry, which enabled Og to live through the flood. These stories also open a window into the ways ancient cultures viewed and revered longevity and supernatural survival. They blend the boundaries between myth and perceived historical fact, providing insights into how ancient peoples interpreted and understood their world. The legend of Og continues to be a subject of discussion and analysis, not only for its content, but for what it reveals about human nature and our inclination to weave incredible tales of survival and heroism. Perched on the highest mountain in the region, as floodwaters started to rise, Og found a way to survive by leaning on strong cedar trees. These trees acted as a life raft, enabling him to live for many days without access to food or water. Some might find this story hard to believe, but supporters argue that his giant nature gave him the ability to go through long periods without eating, much like a bear during hibernation. They claim this trait helped him remain robust and unaffected by the lack of sustenance. In another version of the story, Og, anticipating the flood, decided to take proactive steps by building a massive ark. This ark was intended to be a safe haven not only for him, but also for other giants and various animals from the Bashan area. Using his extraordinary strength, Og would have cut down the massive trees of the Bashan forest to construct his ark. These trees were famous for their durability and strength, making them perfect for building a sturdy vessel that could endure the great flood. Additionally, some stories introduce a more mystical element to Og's origins. According to these tales, Og was the offspring of a union between a fallen angel and a human woman, his birth occurring just after the floodwaters receded. This version of his story connects him to a larger, more divine drama, suggesting his existence was intertwined with both earthly and heavenly events. Amid these various accounts, the exact details of Og's life and survival methods are clouded in doubt, with each story offering a different perspective that challenges our understanding of what might be possible. Exploring these old stories might seem like dredging up forgotten tales, but there's a reason they resonate. There is a clear interest in linking dramatic stories from the past to the economic and geographical importance of places like Bashan. Perhaps it's the human fascination with weaving connections through time, no matter how speculative or loosely based on evidence these stories are. There's a distinct appeal in recounting tales of giants and ancient battles, especially when they involve strategic battles over lands rich in natural resources. It's about drawing lines from the mythical to the real, seeing the past not just as a series of stories, but as a narrative intertwined with economic and strategic importance. This approach not only keeps the old tales alive, but also gives them a new dimension by tying them to real-world implications and historical significance. Next, we enter Ashtaroth Karnaim, a city with a modest but important past, the hidden city of Ashtaroth Karnaim. In the ancient Middle East, there was a city called Ashtaroth Karnaim, also known as Astro-Karam or simply Karan. It is mentioned in the Bible, specifically in the Old Testament, where it plays a modest role in the broader historical context of the region that now includes modern-day Israel, Palestine, Jordan, and parts of the Middle East. The city was situated in an area once controlled by King Og of Bashan. This was a critical region during the time when Moses led the Israelites through enemy territories on their way to the Promised Land. When the Israelites conquered Bashan under Moses' leadership, Ashtaroth Karnaim was absorbed into their expanding territory. However, the city itself is only briefly mentioned in the scriptures. It is often connected to the local kingdoms and communities that were part of the ongoing conflicts in the region as the Israelites moved forward to the land promised to them. The giant king's confrontation with the Israelites is a notable episode involving Ashtaroth Karnaim. Og opposed the Israelite advance but was ultimately defeated, an event detailed in the Book of Numbers. This defeat marked the inclusion of Ashtaroth Karnaim into the lands controlled by the Israelites. The historical importance of Ashtaroth Karnaim may not be highlighted in the biblical text, where it serves more as a setting for significant events rather than as a focal point of action or detailed discussion. It is portrayed as a strategic location during the times of conquest, but it lacks a rich or detailed story of its own within the biblical accounts. The limited mention of Ashtaroth Karnaim in historical narratives shows that it was considered significant enough to be noted, yet not central to the unfolding events of the time. It functioned as a part of the backdrop against which larger battles and more central stories were told. The city's role in these ancient stories reflects its strategic importance, even though it does not stand out with a unique tale or dramatic highlights. The biblical passage from Deuteronomy describes the region of Bashan, which stretched from southern Gilead to northern Hermon, and from the Jordan River in the west to Sala in the east. This large area was granted to the half-tribe of Manasseh, as documented in the book of Joshua. Golan was designated as a city of refuge. This meant it was a safe place for those who had accidentally caused harm to others, allowing them protection until they could be fairly judged. Another city, Argob in Bashan, gained importance during King Solomon's reign. It served as one of the administrative districts, indicating its role in the governance and organization of the kingdom during that period. Arab, part of Bashan, ruled by King Og, was known for its fertile lands, ideal for agriculture and raising livestock. Its lush pastures and rich natural resources made it a valuable area for cultivation and herding. After the Israelites defeated King Og and conquered Arab, they incorporated this fertile region into their newly established territories in the Promised Land. This addition was crucial as it provided them with abundant resources and fertile lands, which helped in the stability and prosperity of the tribes of Manasseh and Gad. After these events, Bashan slowly fades from the historical narrative, mentioned only for its lush grazing lands suitable for wild cattle, noted in Ezekiel 39:18. The shift from a contested region to a mere grazing area reflects the changing importance of territories as political and economic priorities evolve. This series of events in Bashan showcases the fleeting nature of human control and the changing significance of places over time. It illustrates how areas once central to political power struggles can eventually become quiet, forgotten lands, remembered only for their natural resources rather than their historical significance. The story of Bashan, captured in a few scriptural passages, serves as a reminder of the impermanence of power and the relentless passage of time that diminishes the stature of once significant locales. The passage describes various biblical regions and their historical significance with a tone that feels like it's showing off academic knowledge. In the book of Psalms, there's a brief mention of the area. Isaiah talks about its large oaks. Ezekiel references it too, as does Amos and Jeremiah, who both highlight its beauty with poetic flair. Moving on, we examine the changes in the region and the impact of historical battles. The forgotten kingdoms of ancient Gilead. After the region was conquered, it was renamed Gilead, marking a significant change post-victory. Following the period of exile, the area was divided into 4 different districts. The most well-known of these is Golan, primarily because it includes the famous Golan Heights. Horn gets a quick mention as either a city or district, cited briefly in Ezekiel. The remaining 2 districts, Argob and Batania, might pique the interest of those familiar with ancient histories, but they tend to be just names on a list in many biblical discussions. This detailed listing, although rich in historical detail, often feels like an intellectual display. It seems designed more to impress with its scholarly depth than to connect with readers on a more engaging level. The passage catalogs historical facts and names with precision, but sometimes misses a chance to relate these details to the broader human stories they belong to. It turns dynamic histories into static entries, treating the vibrant lives and events of the past as mere data points in a historical record. Such an approach, while informative, may come across as dry and detached. It delves into the drama of ancient times without capturing the personal struggles and triumphs of the people involved. As a result, the narrative might dazzle with its historical accuracy, yet fail to stir deeper interest or empathy among those looking to understand the human aspect of these historical events. Joshua, chosen to guide the Israelites, encountered many challenges, including battling a giant named Og of Bashan. Stories often portray Joshua defeating Og with a spear, marking him as a heroic figure. However, the reality is likely less spectacular. Og was one of many enemies the Israelites faced as they tried to take over Canaan, a region filled with ongoing conflicts and tough opponents. These stories exaggerate Og's size and strength, describing him as a terrifying giant king to make Joshua's victory seem more impressive. This kind of exaggeration is common in historical stories. They turn regular military battles into larger-than-life events to inspire admiration and loyalty. In fact, Og was probably similar to other foes of that era, just another part of the constant battles over territory that fill much of ancient history. Historical accounts often enhance ordinary events, depicting them as heroic or even magical achievements to make leaders look better and justify their actions. They turn messy, everyday struggles into simple, clear stories of good overcoming evil. This method of writing history makes it seem like the leaders were destined for their conquests, smoothing over the harsh realities of their actions. It helps both people at the time and later historians to accept the violence and decisions made during these campaigns. By making leaders appear extraordinary and chosen by divine forces, these embellished stories not only entertain, but also create powerful legends that bring people together under a common cause. These myths are useful tools for those in power to shape public perception and maintain control, overshadowing more complex, less flattering truths. Now, let's dive into the exaggerated tales of giants and their roles in ancient victories. Giants in the scriptures. Legends or reality? The description of Og as a giant could have been an exaggeration to enhance the tale. Throughout history, it's common for stories to be embellished to paint leaders and their victories in a more impressive light. This tendency to exaggerate the truth helps to instill a sense of pride and legendary status to historical figures and their accomplishments. Moreover, presenting Og as a towering giant makes the military successes of Joshua seem even more impressive. It's a way of making ordinary military victories appear as monumental achievements. This not only elevates Joshua in the eyes of his followers, but also serves as a motivational tale for future generations. At 15 feet tall and 6.5 feet wide, this creature towered like a tree. Facing such a giant in the middle of a battle surrounded by many soldiers was daunting. From my view, it looked more like a monster, belonging more in ancient legends than on a battlefield. Its massive size was not just a physical challenge, but a mental one too, making even brave soldiers feel small and vulnerable. Facing this giant was not simply about engaging in battle. It deeply tested the soldiers' courage and their ability to think strategically. Picture the incredible bravery required to walk towards this enormous foe, fully aware of the looming danger of being effortlessly squashed under its massive size. Those brave enough to confront the giant had to conquer immense fear, advancing step by step even when every instinct inside them screamed to turn and flee. This situation demanded not only physical strength, but also a great deal of mental strength and resolve. Each soldier had to push beyond their limits, harnessing every ounce of courage to face a threat that could easily overpower them. The act of standing up to such a daunting challenge speaks volumes about their dedication and the sheer willpower it took to not back down despite the overwhelming odds. The Bible mentions several groups of giants, tracing their origins to ancient times and reflecting a narrative woven through the Old Testament. Introduced in the earliest texts of the Bible, the Nephilim are depicted as the colossal offspring resulting from the extraordinary union between divine beings from the heavens and the human women of earth. These beings were noted for their exceptional size and immense strength, earning a reputation as the heroic figures of antiquity, celebrated in many stories passed down through generations. Believed to have possibly survived the Great Flood, these giants' influence and bloodline might have extended into later generations, possibly through the descendants of Noah. The Anakim, direct descendants of the aforementioned Nephilim, first encountered the Israelite explorers during their reconnaissance missions in the land of Canaan. These towering individuals were distinguished by their significant height and were known to dominate the regions they inhabited. Their presence posed a formidable obstacle to the Israelites' conquests. Most of the Anakim were driven from their lands by the military campaigns led by Joshua, though a small number remained in certain fortified cities, including the well-known city of Gath. The Emim and Zamzumim, also referred to as Zuzim, were similar in stature and might to the Anakim and inhabited the Transjordan region prior to the Israelites' arrival. Described as tall and powerful, these groups were regarded with awe and fear by their contemporaries. As the Israelites expanded their territory, they confronted these tribes, ultimately overcoming them. In a series of battles, these encounters were part of the larger narrative of the Israelites' quest to establish themselves in the Promised Land. facing and conquering giants who were both awe-inspiring and intimidating. The Anakim were a group of giant people mentioned in the Bible. They lived in the southern part of Canaan, near a place called Hebron. These giants were said to be descendants of a person named Anak. Joshua, who later became the leader of the Israelites, fought against the Anakim and managed to drive most of them out of their land. However, some of the Anakim survived and moved to cities like Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. These cities later became known for their own giants, like Goliath, whom David fought in the famous story of David and Goliath. So the Anakim are remembered as these big, horrible giants in the Bible that the Israelites had to fight to live in Canaan. Their story is often used to show how the Israelites overcame big challenges with the help of their faith. The Emim and Zamzumim, also known as Zuzim, were formidable tribes that lived in the ancient Transjordan region, an area east of the Jordan River. These tribes are often intertwined in historical and scriptural narratives due to their gigantic stature and fearsome reputation, drawing comparisons to the Anakim, another tribe of giants. Their presence in biblical accounts is significant, contributing to the rich tapestry of Middle Eastern ancient history. The Emim, regarded as part of the Rephaim, a term used for multiple giant clans in the Old Testament, were primarily associated with the territory that later became Moab. Biblical texts describe the Emim as a populous and mighty tribe, comparable in stature to the Anakim. The Zamzumim, similarly described as a powerful and numerous nation of giants, were known to the Ammonites as Zamzumim, but referred to by others as Rephaim. Their domain was eventually overtaken by the Ammonites before the Israelite incursions into the region. These tribes' legacies are marked by their ultimate defeats. The Israelites, led by figures like Moses, subdued these giants as part of their conquests east of the Jordan. This narrative of conquest over such formidable foes highlights the divine support believed to have been provided to the Israelites during their migrations and battles. The accounts of these tribes are found in religious texts and echoed in various historical interpretations that attempt to piece together their identities and cultural aspects. Despite their annihilation, the memory of the Emim and Zamzumim has persisted through biblical references and archaeological explorations that seek to uncover more about their way of life and their sudden disappearance from history. Furthermore, the intertwining of these tribes with the broader narrative of the Nephilim giants and other giant clans in the region adds layers to our understanding of the ancient Near East mythological and cultural landscape. Their stories, blending historical events with mythological elements, offer a glimpse into how ancient societies viewed themselves and the supernatural forces they believe shaped their world. The Amorites were another group that the Israelites encountered. In the Bible, the prophet Amos described the Amorites as being as tall as cedar trees and as strong as oak trees. This description highlights their impressive height and strength. The Israelites, with help from their God, were able to defeat the Amorites too. The Bible's giants, such as Goliath and his relatives, often symbolize the great obstacles faced by the Israelites in their quest for the Promised Land. The most famous giant, Goliath, hailed from Gath and was portrayed as a significant challenge until defeated by David, marking a pivotal moment in biblical history. The biblical giants serve as symbols of the challenges and struggles faced by the Israelites. Each group of giants represents a different aspect of these struggles. The Nephilim, as the earliest giants, set the stage for the ongoing conflict between good and evil. The Anakim, with their direct connection to the Nephilim, show the persistence of these challenges even after significant events like the flood. The Amorites, compared to towering trees, symbolize the strength and resilience of the enemies faced by the Israelites. The story of Goliath is a famous part of the Bible, where he stands as a powerful warrior from Gath, a city of the Philistines. Goliath was not just a normal soldier, he was a giant. Reports about his height vary, with some saying he was about 6 feet 9 inches tall, and others claiming he was almost 10 feet tall. These differences show how stories change as they are told and retold. Goliath's role was to challenge the Israelites to a one-on-one fight to settle disputes. This was a common way to avoid unnecessary bloodshed in battles. Goliath, wearing heavy armor and carrying big weapons, was meant to scare his enemies. He would stand and shout challenges to the Israelites, trying to frighten them and show the strength of the Philistines. The most important part of his story is his fight with David, a young shepherd who wasn't even a trained soldier. David didn't wear armor and only had a sling with stones, yet he defeated Goliath. This fight is often seen as not just a win in battle, but a symbol of how faith and smart thinking can win against big problems. There are also different stories about who really eliminated Goliath. Some say it was another fighter, not David. This shows that sometimes multiple stories can mix together over time, especially in oral traditions where tales are passed down by word of mouth. Goliath is also linked to other giant warriors in the Bible, like the Anakim or the Rephaim. These connections make his story even more interesting, as they add a layer of mystery and legend. Goliath's story is more than just a historical record. It teaches about the power of believing in oneself and facing big challenges. It's a story that has been told for many centuries, inspiring people to think about how even the toughest problems can be overcome. The narrative of the giants in the Bible is a complex and multifaceted one. Each group of giants adds to the richness of the story, showing different aspects of the challenges faced by the Israelites. From the Nephilim to Goliath, these giants symbolize the ongoing struggle between good and evil, the persistence of challenges, and the ultimate triumph of faith and determination. Do you believe in divine protection, or is it a comforting tale we tell ourselves? Share your thoughts, leave comments, and subscribe for more.